I open this academic session in which Ms. Sutthavas will defend her academic thesis, Bioceramic Nanoparticles for Bone Regeneration. I welcome you, of course, and wish you lots of success together with your pioneers. I also welcome your supervisors, Professor Habibovic and Dr. Van Rijt, of course, the members of the opposition, who you will meet later, and of course, the audience on site and online. But before we start the opposition, I give you the opportunity to show the family and friends what you have presented in your thesis.
Thank you, Paul Rector, dear member of Corona, colleagues, friends, and family, both presented here and online. Welcome to my defense. With the ever-increasing aging population, there is an urgent need for new solutions to treat large bone defects. However, the current gold standard treatment consists of autograft, which use patient-owned bone, have the limitation of availability, and can cause the complications such as donor site morbidity. Therefore, researchers have explored the different types of synthetic material which have off-the-shelf availability in a large quantity. One category of material that are promising for bone regeneration are bioceramic nanoparticles such as calcium phosphate, mesoparasilica, and bioactive glass. They are promising because they are inherently bioactive. Their ion constituents, such as silica, calcium, can promote bone formation process, and we can also have the high control over their synthesis. Furthermore, they are biocompatible and can be used as effective drug delivery vehicle. As such, drug and growth factor can be incorporated into these nanoparticles to improve their bioactivity further. Bioinorganic ion also can be the promising additive to incorporate into these nanoparticles, as they have been shown that it aids several processes involved in the bone regeneration, such as osteogenesis, which involved in the bone formation, angiogenesis, which involved in the blood vessel formation, and have antibacterial activity. However, much is still unknown how to best design this nanomaterial to optimize the use in bone regenerative application. Specifically, how nanoparticle physical properties such as their shape, composition, morphology can influence their bioactivity. In this thesis, we concern the investigation of several silica and calcium phosphate-based nanoparticles and their structural optimization toward application in bone regenerative field. In Chapter 3, we investigate the shape effect of calcium phosphate nanoparticles to their bioactivity. While in Chapter 4, we explore how the bioceramic nanoparticle can be used as the ion delivery vehicle. In Chapter 5, we further investigate how ion can be incorporated into nanoparticles and how that affects their degradation and bone regenerative ability. Finally, we test whether the laser doping technique could be used to incorporate ions and create bioactive nanoparticles. While nanoparticles could be synthesized via various methods, we use a modified co-condensation method, which allows relatively ease to modified core, which allow the particle tracking, control its size via layer by layer addition, and to functionalize the surface to create a calcium phosphate coated mesoporous nanoparticle. This method is used in Chapter 3, 4, and 5. It has been shown that surface topography can affect the cell adhesion and their differentiation. However, the effect of nanoparticle shape is not yet known. In order to investigate how the shape of nanoparticle could affect their bioactivity, we successfully synthesized 3 calcium phosphate nanoparticles with different shapes using the wet precipitation method, resulting in a nanoparticle with a similar in size and chemistry, but in the following shape. the needle, rise, and the spherical shape. These nanoparticles were then used to create the thin film where the human mesenchymal stem cell, or HMSC for short, was seated on, and the several osteogenesis markers were tested. Furthermore, the cell morphology was also investigated, as is an important visual clue to cell behavior. We found that the needle-shaped nanoparticle could promote the HMSC osteogenic more efficiently compared to other shapes, especially for the early osteogenic markers like RUNX2 and BMP2. While rice-shaped nanoparticles were effective a little bit for the later osteogenic markers such as ALP, OPN, and OCN. Cell adhesion to the needle-shaped nanoparticle film also show more spreading morphology, which related to osteogenic differentiation commitment. Therefore, we show that nanoparticle shape is important factor determining their ability to induce cell adhesion and differentiation. Next, we explore how we could use nanoparticles to deliver several therapeutic ions to enhance the bioactivity of the material. The ion doping of ceramic nanoparticles is a popular approach in the field to improve the bioactivity property of nanoparticles. However, how to best optimize them in terms of ion choice, ion composition, and ion release is yet fully understood. The mesoporous silica nanoparticle structure can be used to incorporate the multiple ions, whether in the mesopore, in the matrix, and or deposit on the surface. In this project, we use a mesoporous silica nanoparticle loaded with a strontium ion with or without calcium phosphate coating to deliver single or multiple ions to the cells. The addition benefit of the calcium phosphate coating is that it's pH responsive, where we only observe the ion release at a low pH, such as those found in the cell vesicle during the cell uptake of the mesoporous silica nanoparticle. This process, called endocytosis, since the ion also uptake via the ion channel, we also want to investigate the effectiveness comparatively to each other. So in this chapter, we want to investigate that can the multiple ions stimulate the osteogenesis more effectively in comparatively to the single ion? And is the nanoparticle endocytosis more effective than the ion uptake via the ion channel? We successfully synthesized the multiple ion-loaded mesoporous silica nanoparticle. It has shown the pH response release and intercellular uptake in the HMSC. The ion-loaded MSN also could induce the expression of early, middle, and late osteogenesis marker in HMSC in the basic medium without other stimulants. Delivered by a MSN to reduce the ion loaded needed to stimulate osteogenic activity in the stem cell, much less than comparing to the direct ion addition in the medium. Multiple ion MSN also found to be more efficient to stimulate osteogenesis than the single ion. Therefore, multiple ion and nanoparticle-mediated uptake via endocytosis is promising mechanism to promote HMSC differentiation. Building on this knowledge gained from our previous study, we then investigate the importance of incorporation on the bioactivity. Using zinc as a representative osteogenic ion, we investigate zinc incorporation on the surface, in the mesopore, and in the matrix. Moreover, we create a biodegradable mesoporous silica nanoparticle, or MSN, to investigate the importance of the mesoporous silica nanodegradation and their activity. The degradable silica matrix was created by addition of the impurity into the silica network during synthesis. The mesoporous bioactive glass were obtained from our collaborator. We demonstrate that the calcium phosphate coating leads to the stable MSN and MBG at the neutral condition, but stimulate the ion release at the acidic condition. Moreover, degradable MSN with the zinc incorporated in the mesopore were more effective in promoting ALP production in HMSC. Therefore, the zinc incorporation amount, release profile in association with silica ion release were important factors in determining their bioactivity. As such, these factors should be considered in the design of therapeutically active ion-doped silica nanoparticles. Ion incorporation in the MSN and bioactive glass via wet synthesis has many disadvantages. Only so many ions can be incorporated before negatively influence the particle formation. Especially, the incorporation of ion is difficult. However, the ion play an important role in stimulating blood vessel formation, which is vital for transportation of the nutrient and ensure the proper bone regeneration. Therefore, we explore the alternative synthesis method to incorporate the multiple bioinorganic ion into the solid bioactive glass nanoparticle using the laser doping technology. This technique was performed by our collaborator at the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany. After processing the laser-doped nanoparticle capacity to induce osteogenic differentiation in HMSC and angiogenesis vessel formation in human umbilical vein endothelial cell were evaluated. The laser doping could be successfully incorporated 3 ions, strontium, iron, and copper into the solid bioactive glass nanoparticle without affecting their morphology and size. Albeit in the low quantity, the multiple ion incorporated bioactive glass nanoparticle have significantly higher endogenetic activity compared to the non-doped counterpart. Therefore, the laser doping technique is a viable method to incorporate onto the bioceramic nanoparticle. In summary, this thesis demonstrates that osteogenic differentiation of the human mesenchymal stem cell is influenced by the shape of the calcium phosphate nanoparticle. Bioceramic nanoparticle can be used as effective multiple ion delivery system to stimulate osteogenic stem cell differentiation. Zinc incorporation amount and release profile in association with the silica ion release are important factors in determining their bioactivity. Laser doping technique is a viable method to incorporate ion onto the bioceramic nanoparticle. The knowledge gained could be used in a different ways, such as decide rule on which shape of nanoparticle to use for the coating implant, which ion to use to create the most bioactive nanoparticle, which could then be used as an additive to another biomaterial. Optimize ion release to match those target process relevant to bone repairing process, or use it as an alternative to incorporate ion that can improve not only blood vessel formation process, but to be used to incorporate other ion that can further beneficial to other processes involved in bone regeneration. In summary, this thesis contributes to increase the understanding on how bioceramic nanoparticle can be designed and optimized for bone regeneration application purpose. This can further lead to more affordable, effective, and accessible bone regeneration treatment in the future. thank you for your attention.
Thank
And
you.
I'll give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you, Ms. Sutthavas, for a clear presentation. We are now going to start with your position, and the first opponent is also the chairman of the assessment committee, that's Professor van Griensven, and he's professor of regenerative medicine in the Department of Seabite Merlin in the University of Maastricht. Professor van Griensven.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, thank you for the very nice presentation. I read also your book with great interest, and congratulations to that, and of course also to the supervisory team. I want to start with you to speak about chapter 3. When you go to page 53, there you show very nice how certain molecules that are important for osteogenesis are increased in the MSCs. When I look at the rice form, you see actually that you have high RANX2 at day 21. Mm-hmm. You have BMP2. But what is then interesting is that the rest of the differentiation markers, so the late differentiation markers like osteopontin and osteocalcin, are lower actually. Mm-hmm. So I found it intriguing. Can you perhaps elaborate why the early marker is there, the BMP, the growth factor is there, but you don't really see the late markers?
Well, thank you for a highly esteemed opponent, and thank you for your kind word. We think that we saw the commitment of the HMSC. Perhaps maybe it's still neither we need to wait a little bit more, as we know that not every stem cells, and because here we use the different primary cells, which we can also be in the donor variation between each one. So it's possible that it might involve another process. Maybe we need some signal from also neither autoclast or other cells, because here we do the monoculture. It could be that way.
Okay, so you see BMP2, which is normally a quite strong inducer. Do you know if the BMP2 can also go in other directions than osteogenesis?
From what I have read, it's possible that some BMP2 also can induce into the different lineage. There's some reporting that, so that's why that's also why the reason we was investigating in iron and not BMP2 or growth factor directly, because it has been reported that it can push the cell into another lineage commitment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Then I want to go to figure 6. Because there you show similar markers actually, but what is intriguing is that you show there that the film is actually the best. Whereas before you had your particles, the rice form, etc. So why do you think the film is here so good?
Well, if you compare the chapter 3 and chapter 4, what the reader might not notice is that the amount and the way we dope them is slightly different. In the chapter 3, we calculate how much the nanoparticle and ions is on the film. And then toward those 28 days, I divided to keep the constants, but then the total amount of the ion nanoparticle is the same to that film. But in the chapter 4, that's when we say that the suspension is more effective than the film, is because we dose at the constants, the concentration at every medium change. Mm-hmm. So in the chapter 4, we already discussed how the dose is actually defect the differentiation of the HMSC.
And now that you make the nice connection between chapter 3 and 4, because I actually also did that, the film is like from the outside, whereas in chapter 4 you show you actually internalization. Mm-hmm. So is there also a difference between stimulation from outside of the cell versus the incorporation in the cell?
I think so, because like there's some report that for the surface topography, it might be the simulation via the integrin and the vinculin reception that cause the tension between in the microtubule within the cells. So it's attached, and then somehow it sends the signal via mechanical force. In the chapter 4, we saw that yes, the nanoparticle enter the cells, and there's a decrease in the ion. So might be that might be the way that the endocytosis way stimulate the HMSC. So it might be different mechanism altogether in the differentiation.
I fully agree with you. When we looked at the film, I think somewhere in your conclusion you also said it may be that you can use it for coating of implants, inert implants, which are typically titanium, for instance. How do you think that you can make your coating on such an implant? Surgeons are persons that are very rough, hammering it in. How do you keep your coating on your implant?
That's a very good question, but according to me, but correct me if I'm wrong, because we know that we have the orthopedic surgeon background in the audience. We could be doing by also improving, because when you hammer, say, the femur bioimplant in, you not just go straight and hammer it like the nail. From my own background, of the bioengineering, you have the slot, you have the guideline implant. So maybe by improving that, we could minimize the damage to the coat. And of course, we could even providing some further modification that can, when it's enter the body, attacking with the bloodstream or something, could be another protective layer that is responsive when it's enter the body.
Okay, thank you. It would be very interesting to see, because that would be super important to have the connection, of course. Then perhaps a last part in that. When you go to figure 6, you show actually that the osteogenic medium is very high. When you have implanted in a body, do you think that like the osteogenic medium, there are certain things like vitamin C and beta-glycerol phosphate? Do you think when you have it in the body, that is a similar surrounding?
We probably definitely don't think that the body would, because here we use the mesothelin drugs to have as a positive control. From what we know, in the body is not that easy to stimulate this, and of course, obviously, if every patient have the different cell capacity to regenerate, that's why we would. That's why, of course, when we further go into the animal study, we have to be quite specific what kind of application we want to use. Are we doing it with, for example, are we encapsulate cell already with the nanoparticle inside, or we use it as a coating and then put it in the bone region?
Thank you. I really am happy with your answers, and I give back to the pro-rector.
Thank you very much for your opposition, Professor van Griensven. The second opponent is also a member of the assessment committee. That's Professor Ito, and he's professor of orthopedic biomechanics in the Technical University of Eindhoven. I would like to thank you for coming all the way from Eindhoven. The University of Maastricht is always glad to welcome guests from outside. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, I'd like to also congratulate you and your promoters on this very interesting work concerning calcium phosphate and silica nanoparticles. I also noticed in your CV that you had previously studied in Japan.
Yes.
So, hajimete yoroshiku onegai shimasu. So what I'd like to do is ask you, start off by asking you about chapters 4 and 5. So what I noticed is that, yeah, they are different, but they're similar in the sense that you have these silica nanoparticles. But in chapter 4, you have these strontium-releasing particles, and in chapter 5, you have these zinc-releasing nanoparticles. And it seems that according to your conclusions, they both stimulate osteogenesis.
Yes.
So the question is, yeah, which do you think is more promising and why?
Well, like I said before, what is more promising depends on where you want to use it and how you want to use it. Because in chapter 5, as we say in the paper and also in the book, that the amount of the ion is different, and when and how is degradation, and the time is also different. So what would be best is also have to ask the question ourselves, what do we need? Do we need to improve where do we need to improve the differentiation? Do we need to improve more on the proliferation or other process? So one thing that we like to point out and also probably explain why we study both and we focus a lot on the mesoporosilica nanoparticle is that this way we decoupling the ion incorporation, because if you incorporate the ion into, for example, bioactive glass, most of the time we need to have the ion substitution, and that affect the silica network and also degradation of the whole particle, the integrity of the nanoparticle itself. So, of course, if we want to also alter the degradation of the particle, then we might use MBG and stuff. But if we don't want that, we want to control via other mean, we might use the MSN, the modified MSN instead.
So that's a very scientific answer, but for an orthopedic surgeon, that's a little bit difficult to digest and sort of apply.
Yeah.
So if you were talking more at the application end, like for example, if you had a large bone defect after a resection of an osteosarcoma in a long bone, and you want to regenerate that bone versus something else like a prosthesis, bony ingrowth, hip implants that I want to induce more bone ingrowth in the prosthesis.
Yeah.
So what kind of situations could you imagine could differentiate between the two uses?
Well, like what you mentioned, there's a bone integration and then the bone really growing. Of course, the bone integration, we just want calcium phosphate and the collagen structure to ingrow into the prosthesis, so then it fixed and doesn't move. That would probably be even the calcium phosphate without maybe with the mesoporosilica nanoparticle will be a bit better, because then you can play along with it, you can use it. Like what we mentioned, that is we can surface modify it quite well. Like in my group, we have modified, you can add the targeting, so have two more target, or you can even load drugs, maybe for other purpose, for that ingrowth, for the immigration purpose or something. So that, I would recommend that. And if you just want to integrate it into scaffold and help the bone growth, I would probably think the mesoporous, the bioactive glass would be more. But obviously, like I said before, it depends on the situation.
Okay, and the other sort of challenging thing is when you talk about nanoparticles that are free, that are releasing ions and so forth, what comes to the mind of orthopedic surgeons as well, I can just imagine these nanoparticles just going everywhere, right? So how do you imagine actually using these nanoparticles in the application? How will the orthopedic surgeon get the nanoparticles to the location where they're going to have their biological effect?
So I would think that you're referring to the systematic administration vs. the local administration. I would say, of course, if we inject the nanoparticle, right into the bloodstream. Of course, we probably need some more targeting and stuff, so we make sure that it go to the right place. But from what I think that the application, at least for my nanoparticle, is more localized. So we inject it already in the implant, in the bone, make sure that it's connected. Maybe we could do some linker with the polymer, if that like scaffold as a hydrogel or something polymer, if that was the case. Or for the implants, for the titanium implants, we can also use, obviously we haven't tested this, but we have to ensure that neither use some kind of the plasma blast to make sure that the nanoparticles stick to the implant.
Okay. And what was interesting is, in addition to these chapters 4 and 5, you have chapter 3, and that's a different thing. That's a film, right,
Yeah.
with these nanoparticles. So in comparison to the film, how good is the nanoparticles in chapter 4 and 5? So now you have 3 systems.
Yes, like I mentioned to the previous opposition, that it does. We didn't directly compare with the same concentration. So to be honest, we cannot give that definite answer. But we would think that since it's stimulating in different way, we think that it cannot be really directly say which one is really the best. Like I would say again that it's best for certain application, and then another is better for another application.
And you mentioned just now that you think that they act in different ways, right? So as soon as I hear that they act in different ways, I think of opportunities. So can they work in a synergistic way together? Because I can imagine you could
Yes, like that's actually what we were thinking. Like if we go into the more application study, unfortunately we didn't have enough time. We would actually use the mixture of this. Say we use it, link the MSN one inside, and it can have the responsive release to certain whatever condition we design. Use those as a coating to make more fixation and adhesion better.
Okay, good. I'm very satisfied with your answers, and I give the floor back to the pro-rector.
Thank you very much, Professor Ito, for your opposition. Then we have the following opponent, who is also a member of the assessment committee. That's Dr. Barrère de Groot. And she's the head of the development team of Cures Biosciences, and that is in Bilthoven. And thank you for coming all the way from Bilthoven. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Pro-Rector. Dear Mrs. Candidate, I read with great interest your thesis, and I would like to congratulate you as well as your supervisors. I really appreciate the work which has been done, which has been taking into account all the physicochemical aspects, the very systematic approach of testing different materials and different technique, physicochemical but also biological evaluation. So really good work. However, obviously I have questions. And I would like to come back on chapter 3. I'm really interested in the fact that you have created different type of shapes, and you describe how you synthesize these materials in page 41, 42. And you describe that the needles were synthesized at an end temperature of 800 degrees, while the rice materials were finally dried at 90 degrees, and the spheres were dried at room temperature. By X-ray diffraction, you characterize them in a way that they look more or less the same, hydroxyapatite, poorly crystalline, but don't you expect differences in the chemistry of these three materials that you did not catch with these techniques?
The short answer would that will be yes, but also in this, I'm not sure if it might not be clear in the chapter, but later on we also, because we use the polymers to stop it for the growing, so we can have the similar size, and that afterward we do put all of them in the oven to make sure that, as we know before, that the phase of the crystallinity can be different at that different temperature. So we push it to have more harmonious phase. But because we have quite a relatively low production, it's difficult to have the very precise. We try to do the XRD to see if we really have the different and the composition of phase. But it's very hard to do because the signal from the silica as well is also like override some of it. But we're expecting that the C to P is relatively the same.
So you do not have other methods in mind to have a deeper characterization of these materials?
We probably need to bump up a lot of production to have the enough, to have like really a lot, as you probably know, that to analyze in deep for the phase, we need quite a bit of material. So we would like to do that, but obviously we don't have time and limitation of the material.
Well, XRD, according to me, X-ray diffraction, we need 1 gram of material.
Yeah.
But if you are using infrared spectroscopy, I don't know if you have access in Maastricht to this technology, but in general, we need much less.
We didn't have, the one we have doesn't have that sensitivity to do. We have FTIR, but not another one that you mentioned.
So infrared spectroscopy in general, you need very little amount of less than X-ray diffraction. I would expect to see some differences. I mean, that would be a good idea to combine with X-ray diffraction to have more structural understanding of this.
Definitely. If we want to use it as a coating, we need to check that, because definitely the crystallinity is involving also in how it degrades or dissolves, how stable it is onto the material itself. Okay. Thank you for your suggestion.
Yes. Maybe I missed something also in the results of chapter 3. You are doing DLS and zeta potential characterization of these particles. And in the results, I saw that you mentioned the polydispersity of these granules, of these particles, but nothing about the surface charge, while I would expect zeta potential give an idea.
Oh, we actually did test it, and it's actually similar to all of them. We just didn't put it in.
Okay, and what are the values? Are they positive?
It's calcium phosphate, so slightly negative.
Okay, so they are all, so despite the different syntheses, they are all slightly negatively charged. You didn't see any difference. Okay, thank you. Carrying on chapter 3, you created a coating that you characterize by laser profilometry and scanning electron microscope. But do you think that the coating technology you are using does not change the physicochemistry of your particles?
No, because what we did was use a glass slice, and we just charge it with, so it's more the electronic statics. So that way we could minimize the morphology change of the particles to the spin coat them.
Okay, good. And how did you sterilize those materials or those films before doing cell culture experiment?
So we keep them all sterilized and then spin coat in the sterilized condition. And before we culture them, we actually wash very gently with the 70% the ethanol, and then let it dry completely in the sterilized environment before the seeding of the cells. And wash very gently with also like neutral water, the sterilized neutral water.
Okay, so everything was sterilized with ethanol?
Yes.
Okay. So now comes a company medical device question. Ethanol is not really a standard method for sterilization. Would you have recommendations for this material? How to sterilize it in a conventional method?
Well, we would think that maybe we're not sure. That's why we didn't test it. But I would imagine maybe the UV might be the good way, as long as it's not heated too much. Obviously depends. If we want it to be very crystallized, then we can go higher with power. But I would say maybe UV might be the best. So because we cannot use heat, it's risky to use other chemical sterilization method. And
well, UV is not really a conventional method. Gamma irradiation or E-beam is the easiest, most wanted, and the most powerful. Gamma irradiation is creating some heat, but I would like to know what would create heat to these materials if I still have the time.
Yeah. Probably, well, I think for the calcium phosphate, I think it will be actually beneficial if we want it to be crystallized, because it's shown that depends on the calcium and phosphate composition. But from what I saw also in my experiment and other people papers, that if you heat it up, it's become more crystallized, and it's actually better for the stabilization of the nanoparticle, if that's what we want. If we want not so fast degradation, it might be the best suggestion.
Thank you. I think I don't have time for other questions. No. Thank you, I'm satisfied. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barrère de Groot, for your opposition. The following opponent is Professor Honing. He is a professor of analytics in system imaging in the Institute M4I in the University of Maastricht. He's also a member of the assessment committee, and for today he has also accepted the role of secretary, for which I'm very grateful. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, I would say a lot of congratulations in a very systematic way of evaluating bioactive materials. Also, congratulations to the supervisory team. I think you opened a lot of new questions, new sciences, and maybe we can think and discuss about that. But before we go into the sciences, I would like one of the participants to read proposition number 8.
A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Thank you. So the question is, when I read this sentence as a sentence, I would say, yeah, that's very logic. So what's the philosophy behind that?
Well, the philosophy behind that is that we need to take the step, like, into the new way to, even though, like, in this thesis, we use already existing technique, like nano, MSN, MBG have been around for other purpose.
So what you mean, the first step is dare to make a step into the new,
Yes.
without any...
Of course, we need to be ethical, obviously, and to think of, okay, it's already used in this way. Can it also be used in the similar way, but for the different type of cargo, different type of the...
Yeah, so it was on the content, because I was also looking to your curriculum vitae, and I thought, well, you made also the step and dare to go to Singapore, Japan and Europe, so I think that was also first step in a large journey. So well done with that. So maybe you can go into discussions, and I like to discuss about words and what they mean and the definitions of words. So you use in many cases the word bio-inorganic ions. So what's the difference between just an inorganic ion, and anyway inorganic materials are ions in many cases, and what's the difference then with bio?
Well, the official definition that people use for the bio-inorganic ion is that these ions already exist in our body in a various amount.
But then we have another discussion, because I think that all the ions are in your body as cofactors in enzymes.
True.
So why is that special?
But these ions have been proven and shown that it's involved in the process of the different process in the bioactivity. In this case, we're focusing on the bone regeneration, and that's why I call this bio-inorganic ion.
Then we go into another small discussion, and that's continuing on chapter 3, which is a famous chapter. Before we go into that, because if you look to these ions you used, calcium, magnesium, strontium, they are all alkali earth metals, so-called alkali with base, and they are known to be the redox center of all the enzymes like alkaline phosphatase. So the incorporation of calcium, strontium, and so on, they are, I would suppose, I don't know, the activation or the activity of enzymes intracellularly. So is it not obvious that these compounds should have a biological activity?
Well, if you look at the subunit of the bone, yes, calcium and phosphate is already exist in our bone, and it definitely involved in many factors. It's already have been shown that the calcium ion specifically activate both cascade that lead to differentiation in the HMSC. So that's one way we're looking into it. But different ion, even though it's a similar, like have about 2+ structure, actually show the difference in the stimulation activity. Like calcium and strontium, why they known to both induce or stimulate the bone regeneration, it induced in the different way.
Yes, I completely agree, but my statement was that if you think about cofactors, then you should understand that zinc is only activating some cofactors and not all. But okay, I think that is a nice discussion for later or at the coffee. I would like to go to the word crystallinity, because crystallinity, at least, maybe can you give a definition of crystallinity?
So crystallinity for the audience as well is like how the material in the like even sub-molecular form arrange themselves into this kind of crystal-like structure.
But do you mean crystal form? Because crystallinity for me is the degree of amount of crystals compared to the amount of amorphous material, and then we don't know what is but what is amorphous for you? Because for me 20 nanometers is already quite amorphous powder.
That's why it's also difficult to have really high resolution analysis of nanoparticle crystallinity comparatively to the bulk material.
Yeah.
I agree that it's hard to, when it goes into that scale, it's very hard to differentiate with amorphous material and crystallinity, but it's still I would argue that it still matters, even though this is small, because the crystallinity will affect the degradation.
Then that is exactly what you are opening the questions for me, so thank you for that. So now we turn it around. So the crystal form of the calcium phosphate defines the form. So you made needles, you made the rice, you made the spheres, but that would mean, at least for me, is you have different crystal forms, and per definition, crystal forms will have a different dissolution rate. You call it degradation, I call it dissolution rate, because you're looking to dissolution of calcium and phosphate into an extracellular matrix or whatever intracellular. So is here the activity you correlate between sphere and bioactivity not much more a relation between dissolution rate in crystal form and biological activity?
Yes, I agree to state first. I agree with you that it will be different, but I would like to point out that in this chapter specifically, we also test that when it's in the film, it does not dissolve like that much. It's actually like it stays, and it. So I don't think that specifically in this case, the dissolving of the nanoparticle is not important for the bioactivity testing. And we also show that there's no dislocation, no, the ion doesn't increase when we put it in the medium. We have in the supplementary, we have shown that actually the amount of ion, calcium ion actually from the medium actually drop. When we put just the film in the medium and just let it sit there during the cell culture condition. So actually there's a deposition of calcium onto the nanoparticle film instead of the dissolving of the part instead of another way around.
Maybe one slide small question. It's page 99, and I would say as an analytical scientist, I'm always like to look to infrared spectra, and you say I use infrared spectrometry, and like my colleague, to characterize materials. Now, I would say the 1700 vibration, so you are looking to vibration, is a carbonyl vibration, I understand that. But I do not see the difference between the amine-activated microparticles and the non-particles, because all the vibrations I see are in the fingerprint area. So to which vibrations are you looking, and how can you really differentiate them? I mean, it's nice to characterize and just make a spectrum, but I cannot see the difference between the materials.
You refer to the figure S2b?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you see that, because for the surface modification step from the amine to the carboxyl, we actually create the amine carboxyl link. Then it's become, and then on another side, it's become the carboxyl. So that might be why you didn't see the vibration there. But then we was focusing on detecting the COO bond instead.
Yeah.
That is what
I understand that for the carboxylic acid. So
yeah.
you expect a carbonyl vibration, but for the amine and the non-amine, I did not see really a difference. That was my question. So if you characterize, then you can characterize and say, yes, it's what I have. Mm-hmm. But you can also characterize in the sense of, am I pretty sure there's a difference between the both materials? That's another question. Yeah,
we did actually characterize it in the differently. We actually do the fluorescence characterization because it's, yeah, like you say,
that's
it's
nice
difficult.
To know you have another method.
Yeah, it's difficult to see in FTIR.
Thank you for your question, for answering my question.
Thank you, Professor Honing, for the opposition. And now come to the following opponent, who's also a member of the assessment committee. That's Dr. Celia Pastor. She's assistant professor at the Department of Seabite Merlin in the University of Maastricht.
Thank you, Prorector, for the introduction. I would like to congratulate you, dear candidate, for this very nice piece of work. And of course, also to your supervisors. We just need to see how many publications you have, including your thesis. And now let's go to the questions and the discussion. I would like to start with chapter number 2, figure 1, page 16, where you have shown actually the properties, or let's say the morphology of different materials, but you have used different scales. So we are looking at actually different resolution. And I would like to know exactly why, and you did not actually use one single scale bar to really compare all these different materials. Is there any reason for that? Page 16,
you mean the chapter,
number 1.
the figure, the extreme opponent? You mean the figure 1 in the chapter 3? Not,
no.
Okay.
Page 16, figure number 1. That's chapter 2, if I'm correct.
Okay, that's from that's actually not ours. That is from the literature research. So I would say that picture is just to give the idea of how many shapes of the calcium phosphate have been synthesized. And obviously, I don't know why it's probably they also pull it from the different publication themselves. That I would think that's why they use a different scale. And since we didn't have the original data, I cannot modify their picture.
Yes, I understand. Okay, thank you for the clarification. Then I would like to move to chapter 3 again. Page 41 and page 42. It's not still clear to me whether we can actually claim that the different shapes are actually inducing different differentiation states on the cell. So can you maybe go back to this point and how sure are you that it's actually the shape and not the different chemistry, right? Because I still think that probably the chemistry is slightly different, that you prepare these particles in a different way. How sure are you that it's actually the shape that is modifying slightly the cell properties?
The extreme opponent, like I mentioned before, that we actually did the extra step, that we put the film into the medium and also in the cell culture medium, and let it slightly at the different time point, and we didn't see the nanoparticle come out, like especially for the spherical one, because with the silica core, we can tag and visualize via the fluorescent signal, because we can tag them with the fluorescent signal that if they dissolve or come out from the film, we can see it in the medium. And we didn't see that at all for the time length that we do the experiment. So I would think that it, at least through the adhesion way, that it stimulates the osteogenesis, and not through another way that is the nanoparticle come out and go into, or the cell take up the nanoparticle and then the chemistry of it. Obviously, it would also be interesting to see, or if we could make the same shape, but making sure that the different crystallinity is different, then we can test it a little bit more sure. Mm-hmm. That would be next step, I would say.
Yeah, so indeed, I also agree that maybe new experiments would confirm this hypothesis. And then I would like to move to the donors, right? So because you have used one donor for human mesenchymal stem cells, only one. Mm-hmm. Only in chapter 6, if I'm correct, you have pooled different donors. Yeah. I can imagine that it's difficult to obtain this type of material, but could you expect differences based on the donor characteristics? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, within our group, we have primary cells, and we do see the variance about donor. Some of the donor, HMSC, doesn't really stimulate it at all. We pick the one that is good and have the enough amount. That's why also in chapter 6, which is later in my year, we kind of run out of the donor, that one lot.
But actually, do you think that by pooling, you're gonna, I think that's a risky way to move forward, because of course, if you have this donor variability and you are pooling different donors, you might average out, and basically reduce the potential of the one that is actually differentiated, responding to the particles, then you will not see perhaps an effect. So don't you think it would be better to actually test multiple donors and then based on which one responds, then pick up, okay, and go back to the factors? So actually, which one is differentiating better? Because you just mentioned that there are different donors, some respond, some, do you have an idea about what factors are the key factors? So that I think for clinical translation is a very important topic.
Yes, so the question.
You may finish your answer. You may also say enough is enough.
Yeah, so just quickly, yes, in the ideal world, we would like to do that and then go back to do as you suggest. And I would think that it might involve in also the doses. Maybe the different donor need the different doses to stimulate it.
Thank you for your answer. I give the word to the prorector.
Thank you, Dr. Sido Pastor, for your position. And Mrs. Sutthavas, the time appointed for the defense of your thesis has now passed, and the decree committee will withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and the way you defended it. And I ask you and your company here present and online to await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room. So I suspend this meeting.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. All your time, 'cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Get the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
I reopen this academic ceremony. And Ms. Sutthavas, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and the way you defended it, and in view of its positive verdict and taken into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Habibovic is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom, and invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Pichaporn Sutthavas, the degree of doctor, and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you the degree certificate, signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. The co-supervisor, Sabine van Rijt, will now say the laudatory speech.
Dear Pichaporn, Dr. Pichaporn, dear Por, it is my great pleasure to be the first to congratulate you on this great achievement. It's been a long and sometimes rough journey, but you can be very proud of the results. You approached Pamela and myself about 6 years ago. You had obtained a fellowship from the Thai government and wanted to perform your PhD thesis work at the Merlin Institute under our supervision. And so we started on the journey together. Merlin had only just established itself and the chemistry labs were still being built and equipment needed to be purchased. I also had just started at Merlin a year before, and so we were a small research group. You helped me set up the lab, and you worked closely with several master students, namely Roger and Leah, with whom you also share co-authorships. I was grateful for your assistance, and very early on it became clear that you worked well with others, and you were always eager to help and share your knowledge. You started your project synthesizing calcium phosphate nanoparticles. Although calcium phosphate was a well-known material in our department, the chemist's approach of how to synthesize these using what we chemists call the wet synthesis techniques with defined chemistry, size, and morphology was your first challenge. Soon it became clear why little was known about the effect of nanoparticle shape. It proved quite difficult to develop these in such defined ways. It was great to see you overcoming that challenge. What I personally appreciated is that you made this project your own by also calling one of these nanoparticles rice-shaped, going back to your Thai heritage and your love for cooking. The development and optimization of silica and calcium phosphate nanoparticles and their ability to promote osteogenesis in vitro is a red line in your entire thesis. Next to learning and utilizing the chemistry, including all the characterization techniques, your thesis also contains a strong biological component. You work with mesenchymal stem cells and you applied a multitude of techniques, including PCR, Western blot, flow cytometry, microscopy, and more, to understand how nanoparticle design influences their ability to promote stem cell differentiation. Some of these techniques gave you more headache than others. I remember when you were finally able to produce the Western blots we needed for your first publication, and how happy you were with the results. This is just one of the examples of your perseverance. You worked hard on completing large data sets to be able to publish your work. I often had to tone you down to be more selective of the genes and time points you selected. But your perseverance and ambition to collect a lot of data was not without results. You managed to publish 4 research papers in peer-reviewed journals next to 2 co-authorships, and this is something to be very proud of. The path to obtaining the thesis was long and not always easy. As you will probably agree, your biggest challenge was writing your thesis, especially in a time when there were a lot of other things happening in your personal life. It took a lot of perseverance from your side to complete it, and you kept working on it to deliver the thesis that is in front of us today, and that you can be proud of. You were also a very valued colleague at Merlin. I think every one of your colleagues will agree that you were always there to help. Not only there, but also the first one to offer assistance, and always without expecting anything in return. I really appreciate this about you. We also really enjoyed your cooking. Thai dishes that we never heard of or let alone tasted were sometimes brought to our meetings or to the office at special occasions. My personal favorite will always remain the mango dish you once brought. Dear Poor, congratulations on this big achievement. Jin Di Duai. Before I finish, I would like to extend my congratulations also to your husband and your family and friends in the audience and online today. And enjoy this wonderful day. I wish you all the very best in the future in your career and in your family life.
Thank you, Dr. van der Rijt, for a beautiful laudation. And dear Dr. Sutthavas, also on behalf of the University of Maastricht, I congratulate you with the degree you have acquired, and I hope you have the possibility to celebrate this important scientific day. I extend my congratulations, of course, to your supervisors, Professor Habibovic, Dr. van Rijt, and of course to your family and friends here present and online. I would like to thank the members of the opposition for their work, of course, and the technical support team and the PEDEL who made this academic ceremony possible, and to make it possible that we can all see it online as well. Before I close this meeting, I have a short announcement. We are going to leave the room with the young doctor. We're going to make a picture on the foot of the stairs, so we would like to be followed by one or two people with a photo camera. And the rest of the audience can leave this room after us and then go to the rafter where we have a reception. And if you think, when can we congratulate the candidate? It's quite simple. You wait till we enter the room, and then we go first, and then you follow us. Having said that, I close this ceremony.